Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to Senior Thesis Presentations of 2022. We're very excited to make it to this day. There are three seniors that are also very excited. Although some would call it nervous, I call it excitement. I'd like to take this moment to thank our three panelists, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Hornbaker, and Ms. Clark. Let's please give a round of applause for our panelists. And I'd also like to thank all the students and staff that were part of setting up the room and providing all the technical support that we needed this for live streaming. So let's give them a round of applause as well. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to thank my co-teacher, Mr. Brandon Grunden. Thank you for all your help and your patience dealing with me as we go throughout the year. Senior Thesis is not just a paper, it's not just a speech. The goal of Senior Thesis is try to grasp at wisdom. At 42, I don't think I have fully attained wisdom. But at Logos, we're trying to give our students an opportunity, at least in one subject area, to try to grapple not just with knowledge, not just with information, but with wisdom. And the reason wisdom is so different than knowledge and information is wisdom is the ability to say, I know something, but more importantly, I know the way that we should go forward. And so when you hear the speeches today, I challenge you to listen for wisdom. Listen for those pieces that are not just, oh, I didn't know that, but, oh, that's the attitude or the behavior that we need to have to help this world become a whole place instead of a broken place. It's a lot to ask of an 18-year-old, and I want you to realize that these 18-year-olds have put months into reading, discussing, learning, interviewing, speaking, writing, into formulating their ideas and their arguments for these topics. They have become experts. In this room, there's no one who has studied these topics more than the three that are speaking today, not even myself. And so with that information, that should bring about a certain sense of humility in all of us to prepare ourselves to listen and to learn. Before I ask our first speaker to come up, I'd like to pray for all three of them. So let's bow our heads in prayer. Lord Jesus, the one who holds all wisdom that this world could ever contain, and the one who is so, the one who is so quick to share that wisdom with the disciples and with all of us through the Holy Word. We ask for your grace and your mercy, specifically for our three seniors that are speaking today, but also on our whole community. Lord, we ask that you would guide us, whether that's through the learning that we do all school year or through three students that have something to share today. So Lord, be with them. Would you comfort them with your presence? And would you give them the ability to share all that they have learned and share it in ways that come naturally, but then also ways that are persuasive and will change hearts. We ask this all in Christ's name, amen. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker who will be sharing on police and community relations, Luke Anderson.
Good afternoon. It is a great honor and privilege to be the first in the class of 2022 to be presenting for our senior thesis presentations. During my time in high school, our nation has become deeply divided. The American people cannot create a path to peace if they do not repair relationships between local communities and police. In a 2017 interview, the West Palm Beach Chief of Police, Sarah J. Mooney, was asked a critically important question. Why is community dialogue important? She answered, dialogue allows us to humanize what we do. Police work is not just catching bad guys. We're trying to create more opportunities for members of the community to have more than just one contact with us than in a negative light. We'd rather have more positive contact with people. And the more we do it, and the longer we do it, the more our officers realize this is a community effort they want to be a part of. Through the course of my research, numerous interviews with leaders who lived through York's most racially divided years, listening to local conversations between leaders, and interviewing Springersbury Chief of Police Todd King, it is clear that there is still much work to be done in building positive relationships between police and community. There are 3 things we need to survey in order to repair police and community relationships. First, we need to consider the complex history of policing in America. Second, we need to look at the present relations between police and community. And finally, we must prepare ourselves for the difficult work that lies ahead. There are 2 forms of organized policing in our history that are worth highlighting. In 1636, the Night Watch was first founded in Boston, Massachusetts. Men volunteered their evenings to watch the town for fires, wild animals, prostitution, and other illegal activity. The Night Watch was ineffective because the patrolmen drank and slept on the job. The patrolmen were often paid by wealthy upper class to commit illegal acts on their behalf. The second form of policing worth highlighting is the slave patrol. Founded in 1706, the slave patrol served in southern states. It was mandatory for all white males to serve a rotation on the slave patrol. 3 to 6 slave patrolmen would ride on horsebacks carrying guns, whoops, and ropes to use at their own discretion. They would make sure that the slaves were performing their jobs properly. Together, the Night Watch and Slave Patrol, as historical forms of law enforcement, did not create a healthy foundation for positive community relations. It wasn't until the 1830s that the idea of a centralized police department first emerged into the United States. Fast forward 50 years to the 1880s, and all major US cities had a centralized police department in place. The police department shared similarities, such as being publicly supported. Police officers were full-time employees. Departments developed policies and procedures, and police departments were accountable to their local municipality. So that represents a brief history of the genesis of policing into the United States. Modern policing has been shaped most significantly by 20th century police tactics. And the 20th century saw a rise of a number of law enforcement tactics that have been received as aggressive and militaristic. Guard dogs, riot control gear and tactics, and military equipment, such as armored vehicles and military-style rifles, were introduced into policing. These 20th century police tactics have not been received favorably by communities. The militarization of police is a reality, not just a flimsy accusation. Lauren Crow, an Army officer who served in Afghanistan, said her local police department was well equipped to fight in the Afghani mountains. After the largest domestic terroristic attack in the United States on September 11th of 2001, police departments were changed dramatically. Departments shifted towards increased military-grade equipment and training to prepare for future threats. Strategies changed as well. The much despised stop and frisk approach was adopted by the New York Police Department, resulting in heightened confrontations with communities of color. 84% of the stops were made up of the Hispanic and Black New York citizens. Police have millions of confrontations each day with local communities. Some are positive, some are neutral, and a number of interactions have resulted in the death of Black men that have inflamed communities. This led some to advocate for defunding the police during the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. Their message moved some of the funding allocated to criminal enforcement to social programming needed to heal communities at risk. In the long run, this is a very dangerous tactic that will leave officers underfunded and in increased danger. This has not been a popular message due to the rising violence in the United States. President Biden recently pushed back against the sentiment suggesting police need more funding to keep America safe. Are police overfunded? Springersbury Chief of Police Todd King informed me that each department has a fixed and often limited budget. These budgets vary significantly on a variety of factors. For example, the Springersbury Police Department has a $3 million budget. The York City Police Department has a $21 million budget, and the New York Police Department has a $5 billion budget. A substantial portion of these budgets go to pay personnel costs, retirement pensions, and to provide basic equipment. It would not be a stretch to suggest that local departments are underfunded. York County police chiefs were recently surveyed, and on average, it was found that departments have about $500 per officer annually for training. This is not sufficient to cover the full scope of training needed to address mental health concerns, anti-bias training, de-escalation strategies, and other forms of training required to align departments to best practice. Some police departments in the country have been pushed by their governing bodies to reallocate or cut their budgets. Cities like Portland, Oregon have experimented with autonomous zones that are free of police. These autonomous zones saw riots, buildings burned to the ground, small businesses looted, citizens exposed to increased danger, and even gunned down. Autonomous zones did not offer a safer alternative to local policing. Surveying the complex history of policing in the United States and the challenging reality of modern police funding tactics leads us to consider what the future may hold. How can we move beyond our murky history and the perception of aggressive police tactics towards healthy relationships between police and local communities? Is it even possible? I believe the answer is a resounding yes. Romans 13:1 says, "Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority that which God has established." The authorities that exist today have been established by God. Submission to authority does not mean endorsing police bad tactics. Submission is not just rolling over. Children are taught to submit to parents, and husbands and wives are instructed to submit to each other, as it states in Ephesians 5:21. Even Jesus submitted to the will of his Father, just as we are called to submit to God's purpose. We cannot afford to wait for crisis to erupt to begin developing relations between police and community. Common sense tells us that police will have positive, nonviolent outcomes when trusting relationships are already in place. We need public engagement initiatives such as our local chiefs and clergy dialogue. Locally, members of the Black Ministers Association, including Pastor Bill Kearney, Bishop Carl Scott, Dr. Larry Waltower, and Logos Academy's own CEO, Reverend Aaron Anderson, started a monthly dialogue with York County Chiefs of Police called the Chiefs and Clergy Partnership. What started with a few police chiefs and clergy members turned into an over 5-year countywide success. Our nation desperately needs for these conversations to be multiplied. Commissioner Muldrow conducts twice per week community walks to engage local neighborhoods. Departments need funding for training such as de-escalation strategies, mental health awareness, crisis intervention tactics, and implicit bias training. We need investment in experimental equipment that is non-lethal, such as the Bola wrap, which is a handheld device that releases a wrap around the subject detaining for the officer. The American people cannot create a path to peace if they do not repair relations between communities and police. Matthew 5:9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." What if we saw our work of submitting to governing authorities as playing the role of a peacemaker, as taking responsibility to improve the work of police and helping them be successful protecting and serving our neighborhoods? If we adopted such a posture, we would quickly see that we all have a role to play in building healthy relationships between communities and police. Thank you.
you understand the concern that others have with the idea of having closer police-community relations. And you talked about one of the programs that could actually help with training, but also to add or help with accountability. Can you expound on one of those programs?
So one of those programs, as I mentioned, was the local chiefs and clergy dialogue. And I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. So monthly, I believe it's monthly, they meet and they have a topic at hand, and they want to go and combat that topic or talk about it with the chiefs and clergy at hand. So it's effectively a free space to come from both sides who do not, maybe one of the clergy members doesn't know as much as a chief does, and maybe a chief wouldn't know as much as the clergy does. And so it's an opportunity for both parties to come together and talk to each other in a safe space and hear each other. And these relationships have turned positively. Most of these clergy and chiefs were not good friends before this dialogue came together. But after this, now when there's an issue, maybe with one of them needs help, they're able to call them up on their phone and talk. So it's turned into more than just a dialogue. It's turned into friendships that are building communities.
Thank you, Luke.
Luke, thank you very much. In describing the complex history of policing in the United States, you talked about 20th century changes in police tactics, especially the militarization of police. What was the cause, according to anything you came across in your research, for these changes? Why did police start using the military gear and adopting different tactics?
Sure. Thank you for your question. During the civil rights movement, with the protests and all that was happening and the riots, police departments needed to keep the town safe. And so they had to adopt such a militaristic style of policing. But post 9/11, as I was saying, it has increased police departments because the police departments and the government was not ready for such a large domestic terroristic attack to happen in America, that it kind of shook everyone's ground. And so this made us realize that we need to become more militarized. And I think that best answers the question.
Thank you. That's helpful. My follow-up question is there no turning back in the sense of when we give police military-style weapons, is this only an escalating situation, that this is going to require more and more technology, more and more weapons, perhaps a comparable situation internationally, thinking about the Ukraine and Russia conflict, as many countries are not sending soldiers to fight, but money and weapons? Will policing simply require more money, more weapons, more gear in the future?
I think police departments will require more of that stuff just as the world evolves and people will have, like for example, the mental health training and the de-escalation strategies and the anti-bias. That wouldn't have been such forms of training, let's say 50 years ago. And so seeing that today York County chiefs have a little bit of money per officer. Yes, I do believe we will need more money in trainings like this. Who knows what will happen in 50 years? There's going to definitely be more technology on the rise. I mean, you talk to anybody that's in a police field or in the technology field, cybersecurity, and they would say that the rise of cybersecurity crimes is in the rise. Yeah.
Thank you.
Job. It is hard to be the first one to go, and you set the bar very high. I have two questions for you. My first is, do you think police officers should be forced to live in the communities where they work?
I don't know if they should be forced to live where they work. So we just had the privilege of meeting Commissioner Muldrow, and he was talking to the senior class, and he was saying that how he likes to hop out of his cruiser and go walk the community. I think there's more beneficial ways of getting to the community than just living in, let's just say, like the city of York. And I think that's one very good thing that Commissioner Muldrow does, and he's building trust with the citizens at hand of York City. And I think that's just, I know he lives in this, I do believe he lives in the city, but walking in the streets, hopping out of his cruiser, it just shows you can build trust with these citizens and not live in the city.
Thank you. And my second question is, there are several Logos Academy students that I personally know, males of color, who always said that they wanted to be police officers. But after the media coverage of the unrest in response to Ferguson, have now changed their minds. It could have been other circumstances involved, but I'm just wondering what you would say to them.
I think examples, what happened in Ferguson, George Floyd, I think it's a faulty on police departments for not being able to train their officers properly. Seeing that York County York County officers have about $500 per officer annually for training, to put that for all this training and $500, it's not sufficient to cover. So I think that would best, as you were trying to say, that would be like a turnoff for them from going to the department. Now that departments aren't going to be able to adequately fund their officers for training that is life changing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Particularly as we think about weapons, it's a two-part question. Is training enough to address this situation? Particularly, you've talked about the breakdown between the relationship between the community and police departments. Is training enough? And here's another way of considering the question. Does training really address the breakdown, the underlying causes of this breakdown?
So I could answer your question, but I'm going to ask you a question. You are Logos Academy, or you're the principal of high school, and there's maybe an issue that happened this year that you want to address your teachers with. Do you believe that you should train your teachers, or have somebody in here to train your teachers? Maybe it's on mental health or suicide awareness. Do you believe that it's the best practice to have them come in here and teach your teachers and staff on suicide prevention?
There's two decisions I would consider in that scenario. The first is, to what degree can our staff internally provide that expertise and training to one another? And when do we need to access an expert who has information and experience beyond that represented by our staff? Many times, the perspective and input of an external expert is going to be very valuable and stimulate good thinking and conversation. What the external expert is going to struggle to do is help the individuals actually make choices that lead to changed behavior. That's something that has to be worked out, usually internally, by the team who's pursuing some sort of change. So what I'm challenging in this question is thinking about, is training going to be enough? So say $500 not enough. Is it $1,000, $3,000, $10,000? If every department in the county had $10,000, is that going to move the needle significantly on this issue? If not, what else needs to be done?
Right. And I believe that there's more than just the dollars that you're throwing into a budget. I believe that you need a good core and foundation of the department, such as like York City. Commissioner Muldrow has been building trust with his department and the city, and $500 is very limited. But if you're able to have a good leader in there that is able to corral your officers and your department to better community relationships, Your $500 is small, but it can be stretched out. That could make the community a better place.
Did a great job. Thank you so much, Luke Anderson.
Our next speaker is speaking on a topic that's quite relevant for high school students. Speaking on the teenage work experience, please welcome Elliot Kruth.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. My friend Patrick Duggan, a student here at Logos Academy, was hired for his first job in the summer of 2020. At this time, he was hired at Sonic and began the training process. This was his first job, and so he was excited to become part of the workforce and make money. But as time went on in this job and he went through the training process, work was not something that he enjoyed. Instead, he began to dread going into work. There are many reasons behind this. His job was extremely boring, and he also had many problems with his coworkers. As these problems were not resolved and instead began to get worse and worse, he was left with no option but to quit this job. As he left, there was very little gained from this experience. This should not be the case for the average teen work experience. Granted, this is a big improvement from about 200 years ago. At this time, as many of you may know, children were placed to work in factories in horrible conditions at a very young age. They worked outrageous hours and worked sometimes every day of the week. During the mid to late 1800s, however, legislation began to pass on this issue, reforming the child labor situation. Those laws have led to where we are today, as currently in Pennsylvania, you must be 14 years old to hold a job. At this time, you must obtain a work permit, and you have many limitations, such as being limited to 3 hours per shift during a school week. At 16 and 17 years old, you have a few less restrictions, but you are still limited to 28 hours per school week. As many teens have the desire to work at this point in their lives, the Bible clearly aligns with this desire. We read in Proverbs many passages telling us to work hard and avoid laziness. Colossians 3:23 also tells us whatever we do, we are to work at it with all of our heart. As the Bible aligns with society's opinion that teen employment is beneficial, a National Institutes of Health study also backs up this belief. The study found that it is beneficial for teens to work in high school due to the many skills that they gain through this experience. However, they did note that work must not come before important relationships, habits, and activities in a child's life. While working as a teenager is beneficial, the current work experience is subpar. The teen work experience must see an overall improvement. For this to happen, students must pick jobs that will impact their career. Employers must increase pay and incentives, and employers must also improve the environment at their workplace. As I mentioned, Patrick's work experience, many high schoolers have a similar experience. They have a job often in fast food or retail. They clock in and out, they receive a paycheck every 2 weeks, and then they quit for many reasons. Sometimes the job's too boring. Other times they have a poor experience with coworkers or managers. Sometimes the job simply doesn't pay enough. This is not the way it should be. Instead, teens should leave their jobs having gained important skills that will help them in their future careers. This can be done through two main ways: internships or by finding specific jobs that will hone important skills that can be used in any career. Internships are an extremely helpful way for students to be employed in high school. In a study of college students, 80% of those interviewed said that an internship helped them to shift their career path. While the study was done specifically on college students, I believe the results would be even more profound on high schoolers. Think if at this time they were able to have a better idea before they even enter college of what career they want to pursue. Additionally, internships can be helpful to create a network for teens at a young age. Networking is extremely important as 1 in every 4 jobs come from networking. When internships are not a possibility, there are specific jobs that will help to hone skills that will be useful in any career. These are skills such as time management, customer service, respect for authority and coworkers, and a strong work ethic. These cannot be found at just any high school job. Instead, these are something that teens should look for. Now, some may say that this is impossible to find an internship at this point in a child's life. Some may argue that there's not many opportunities out there, or that teens just do not know what career they want to pursue at this time in their life. However, internships are not only an option for those who have exactly their career nailed down already. Instead, internships can be a way to rule out options. You may try one internship. If it's not something you like, you may try another. And then on the third try, you find the career that you want to pursue. And when these internships are not possible, it is important to find jobs that will help train you in these skills that I previously mentioned. One reason that teens quit their jobs is due to insufficient pay. Currently in York, across the board, teens make around $12 per hour on average. When looking specifically at the fast food industry, the average teen makes just $8.36 per hour. This is not enough when viewed in light of the many expenses that teens have to pay. At this time in a teen's life, they have to buy a car to be able to get to and from work. Then they must pay for gas, insurance, repairs to that car. They should have money for clothes and to have activities with friends. Then they should also begin at this time to start saving for college to avoid being in debt for decades after graduating. I personally experienced the insufficient pay when I worked for the York Revolution. At this time, I worked on the grounds crew and made just $7.25 an hour. Each shift was about 6 hours in length, and after taxes, I made about $35 to $48 per shift. Then, when dinner coincided with while I was at work each day, I would have to buy dinner there. Even with a 50% discount, this cost about $6, bringing my total pay for the night down to around $30. This is before even talking about the money to pay for gas to and from the stadium. This just simply wasn't enough. There are many ways to fix this problem, and since the York Revolution has raised their hourly rate to $10 an hour. There are other options as well, such as bonuses and incentives that are helpful to mend this situation. Palace Entertainment and Amusement Park Company has implemented a number of these options since they have many teen employees. They offered their employees 4 free season passes, and this provided them with something fun to do with friends throughout the summer at no expense. Additionally, they received an $100 gift card after working their first 10 shifts. This was a great benefit for the employee and also helped the company to retain employees and not have to hire more workers. They also offered a $2 raise per hour if the employee met their obligations on each shift. This incentivized hard work and good behavior and rewarded employees for doing so. Now, when hearing about all these salary increases, many people would raise the question, well, how will businesses do this? This is just too expensive. However, a study by Variables found that increased wages actually lead to increased productivity. When paying your workers more, they become more productive. You will attract more skilled workers that will be able to offset the cost of additional salaries by getting more work done. There are also many low-cost incentives that can be implemented, such as the season passes, a very low cost to the company, but a good benefit, or free food at a fast food industry. This is very low cost to the company, but saves the worker money. The final reason many teens quit their job is because of the environment at work. I hear many teens complaining of their job being just extremely boring. There are some ways to address this problem. Teens should be trained in every position at their work. Once they're trained in all these positions, their managers can shift them around to different spots throughout their shift, keeping them engaged. Additionally, many teens complain of being treated unfairly at work. Managers should set clear behavioral standards and force their employees to abide by them. They should model them themselves, and they should incentivize this behavior, giving a special privilege or maybe a bonus to those who demonstrate this good behavior towards fellow coworkers or towards customers. Lastly, there should be many opportunities for advancements in the company, giving the employee something to strive towards. Managers should solicit opportunities such as shift leaders or managers and have employees strive towards these positions. In conclusion, the teen work experience must see an overall improvement. This can only happen if students find jobs that impact their careers, employers compensate workers properly for what they do, and employers better the environment in their workplace. Work should not just be teens clocking in and out and receiving a paycheck. Teen employees should not just be a cheap way for employers to get work done. If we do not make any changes to the current experience, teens will have boring jobs from which they gain nothing, and employers will have unengaged and unproductive workers. However, if we make these few small changes, employees will have exciting jobs which prepare them for a career ahead, and employers will have productive, engaged workers. Thank you.
Concerning, you talked about helping teenagers to choose wisely. Do you know of any counseling or advocacy programs that would help students to choose wisely?
I am not aware of any specific programs. However, I know, especially at a school like this, I have many teachers that would be great resources for help in this area. Parents would also be, in some circumstances, a great help for students. But just finding people in your life, such as mentors or teachers, principals, anybody like that you're able to trust, I think could be even better than any programs such as you were talking about.
Thank you. I have one more question. Let's say I'm being interviewed and I have questions for my prospective boss. What 2 questions can you think of that would be best questions I could ask to find out if this job would be the right one for me? And let's say I'm looking for a career opportunity, even though maybe I'm 16 years old.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I think asking about the values of that company would be extremely important to find out. you definitely want to know what kind of company you're going to be standing for, because as an employee of that company, you're going to be representing them. And so you want to know exactly what values you are going to be representing. So I think that would be an extremely important question. And then also just the kind of people that you're going to be working with, finding even, maybe it's not so much a question, but meeting some future coworkers or bosses, I think would be extremely important to know the environment you're going to be working in.
Elliot, thanks for this topic that's of interest, I think, to almost everyone in the room. You mentioned a few times the problem with low pay for teenagers, and I think you mentioned there are many ways to fix this problem. I'm having a hard time thinking of many ways that are going to enable employers to pay teenage workers more. I'll give you two scenarios. One is raise the minimum wage. And let's say take a typical beginning job at a fast food restaurant. Someone comes through the drive-thru and says, everything's $2 more today. And the manager comes out and says, that's right. We started paying all of our entry-level workers more, so all the food costs more here at our fast food place. Because someone's going to have to pay for the higher wages. Is that going to work? Are the customers going to pay when the price gets pushed on to them? And my second scenario is small companies, like a fast food restaurant, there's a limited number of managers. There's probably a limited amount of managerial talent. Your most talented, capable person is probably the lead manager. You have shift supervisors. They're probably in many cases just a little bit older than the entry-level employees. Are you going to pay these people less so that the entry-level employees can be paid more? And if it's not increased prices, if it's not paying your managers less, where's this money coming from to pay entry-level workers more?
So one thing, how you could better compensate these workers may not be like a direct salary increase. So I mentioned free food. So that costs very little acquiring the food. It's very low cost to the company. But I know some people that work at even in fast food restaurants, they still have to pay maybe only a 50% discount on their food. So they get a few dollars off, but they still have to pay towards this. So when you're thinking the meal is $10 and you only get a 50% discount, that's still $5. If you're taking home an extra $5 a shift because your food's free, that's one way to offset that without incurring a big cost to you. Additionally, as I mentioned in the study by variable, these increased wages can often lead to more productive workers. So you may need one less worker on the shift. If you raise your wage by $1, your workers may be more productive and you would need less employees. So you can save costs that way as well.
Thank you. I had several jobs where I was given a free meal as a part of work, and that was a very nice bonus. In your situation at York Revolution, would you have kept working there if you got your $12 meal for free instead of $6?
I'm not sure that there were many reasons that I quit. That definitely would have been a big perk and definitely would have saved. I mean, I think about all the meals that I bought there over my time there, would have saved a lot of money. So that definitely would have been a good incentive. Yeah.
So at least a factor you would consider.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Job, really interesting topic. My question for you is, what do you think would be the pros and cons of a high school student having one job throughout all of high school versus several different working experiences?
I think a lot of that depends on what the specific job is. I think there are many benefits in sticking with one job. If it's something that you enjoy, you are able to build relationships with a lot of different people and continue those relationships. And I think there's many benefits there. However, I mean, I think depending on this job, such as an internship, I think that could be something that you may want to try a number of different options throughout high school to give you experience in different options. But again, if it is something you start an internship, you find that it's something you would like to do for the rest of your life, I think that would be a great opportunity. If you have 3 years experience in a field before you even graduate high school, I think that puts you at a great advantage.
Great. And my second question is, if you're talking to a room filled with business leaders right now, internships are pretty time consuming to an employer. What would you say to an employer who, bottom line, just wants to sell ice cream and aren't as concerned about like the life development of the teenagers who work for them? How would you challenge those business owners?
So an internship is probably going to be more geared towards a different kind of business, not necessarily someone that just sells ice cream, but something that's going to be maybe an engineering firm or something like that, where an employee will be able to gain experience in a field that they're going to pursue the rest of your life. Not many people are going to serve ice cream for their whole life. So I think in businesses like that, having if you invest in a teen at this time in their life, they come back, they graduate college, they know they had this great experience, and now maybe they're able to work for you. And that's a great advantage. You have an employee, that's someone that you already know, you already trust. So I think that can be a great way there.
Great, thank you.
You mentioned a concern with boring jobs, and this being a problem for teenagers. How would you respond to someone who says, actually, it's a very productive experience for a teenager to have a boring job, because this could be a very valuable motivation for them as they think about college and opportunities that will help them develop their skills for the future, that they would have the opportunity to potentially apply for many, many more job opportunities. So my question is, what if this is a necessary part of the workforce? You should begin with a beginning, hard, boring, low-paying job so that you can learn and be motivated.
So yeah, that is true. I mean, there aren't you don't have the same opportunities as a teenager as you have having a degree from a college. And so just like in a job, after you have a degree, you don't go to the top of the chain right away. So there is that sense that you do kind of have to start at the bottom. But my main point was that there are ways to make these jobs less boring, such as having different incentives, having an opportunity for growth to a higher position, being trained in different positions so that you can not be doing the same exact thing for a whole 6-hour shift. Maybe there are things that are similar, but at least you have a little bit of change to go from one thing to another. And it's not like you're sitting doing the same exact thing for 6 hours.
Just one final question for you. You have an interest in business. You're going to be studying business in the future, which is wonderful. Imagine you 5-7 years from now, you come into a new company and you say, I'd like to institute a change here. We're going to start hiring more teenage workers. And the other managers say, no way, why would we do that? What's your reason for making this change in the future business you lead?
I think it's really important to be able to train these teens at a young age. I think often there's so many teens that have an opportunity to grow in an area, and instead they're in these jobs that they're just putting in time, and you're not really letting them grow. And so I think by hiring more teen workers in more fields, I think that would help teens to grow, and they can provide a different angle to the job that adults won't have, and they can provide a really good upside to really any business.
Well done, Elliot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sometimes while we're sitting at our boring jobs, we might be tempted to pull out our phones and get on social media. And sometimes that brings its own problems itself. So our next speaker is going to be speaking on these issues. And so on the topic of social media companies' responsibility, we'd like to welcome Yamilet Sintron.
I know that we've all been told we are wrong for using social media. This is untrue. What if I told you that social media is wrong for using you? Now, I know what you're thinking. Here comes another person to tell me I should stop using my phone and that I should delete my social media. However, this is not what I'm saying. I believe that social media brings forth community. It gives a voice to the unheard people, and it is even an avenue for justice in our country. But it has also slowly destroyed our generation. Social media must begin to change for the well-being of American youth. Now, Meta Platforms began on February of 2004. Today, it consists of 5 separate companies: Instagram, WhatsApp, 2 VR-related companies, and its top-ranking company, Facebook. Facebook, however, has questionable origins. Mark Zuckerberg and a couple of Harvard students decided to begin a platform called Face Smash. This platform consisted of 22,000 photographs of women, and they decided if they were hot or not. Thankfully, this did not last long. Mark Zuckerberg wanted something more prosperous for the future, and he wanted something better for this country. Facebook then became super popular on December of 2009, and today there are more than 304 million American users. Today, I will argue about social media accountability. I believe that the provider has more responsibility than the user. If social media companies continue to turn a blind eye to the negative effects facilitated by their platforms, then the damage on this generation will be irreversible. These platforms must be unmasked. Today, I will argue about 3 realities created by Meta Platforms. Number 1, the negative mental effects on youth. Number 2, the false information that creates division within young people. And number 3, the open and unrestricted drug market. The negative mental effects left on youth leave alarming concerns. Mental health is defined as the emotional, psychological, and social well-being of humans. So what does this mean to us? Believe it or not, social media affects how we think, act, and even feel. Social media use and heightened rates of mental health problems leave concerns. I came across a lot of research as I was doing my project, but the most relevant and shocking research came from the Pew Research Center. But before I go over these statistics, I'd like to ask the audience a question. How many of us use social media? How many of us use Facebook and/or Instagram? Studies show that 45% of American teens are on social media. Of that 45, 97% use Meta Platforms. Addiction towards social media is categorized as a behavioral addiction, found in up to 10% of its users. Studies show that Facebook and Instagram produce the same exact neural circuitry as gambling and recreational drugs. Now, social media is not only a physical addiction, but it is also a psychological one. A psychological addiction is when a person is emotionally tied to something based on a mental desire for it. We are the best example. I am the best example. One day I was watching TV and I wanted to watch it because it was one of my favorite TV shows. I placed my phone right next to me. I began the TV show and a notification popped up. Not even 2 seconds went by when I decided to put my phone over my favorite TV show. I picked up my phone and I attended my notification. By social media improving what we see, the mental health of adolescents in America will grow. Now, the negative mental effects left on youth isn't the only issue. Another problem is the false information that creates division among youth. The New York University reviewed the posts that were released from 2020 to 2021. False posts were found to be 6 times more likely to receive a share, like, or follow. Now, I'll repeat that one more time. False posts were found to be 6 times more likely to receive a like, share, or follow, rather than the truthful post. Facebook produces 2.5 billion pieces of online content every single day. This comes to show that there is more misleading information accessible to young people in America than reliable information. After this, Facebook decided to block New York University from having access to their platforms, and this leaves questions. Feeding false and fallible information to this generation is cruel. By limiting the exposure of content available to us, the irresponsible, uncaring, and unattending platforms would be giving the youth a secure future. Since there's so much given to us and very little taken away, the young generation is having difficulty making correct decisions. Relationships between communities and peers are essential, but having access to false news and opinions has made that impossible. The young generation has had difficulty trusting others, believing in others, and having a firm foundation because of the lack of responsibility that Meta Platforms has shown. I'm gonna give you guys a scenario. Imagine 2 young women, one being raised in the 1940s and another being raised in the 2000s. The young woman being raised in the 1940s has very limited exposure. Her friend group is maybe around her community, and again, she doesn't have too much exposure to the outside world. The young woman raised in the 2000s has social media. She is categorized to be overexposed. She has seen too much at a young age. One, I believe, is better than the other. I believe that being underexposed is better than being overexposed. Social media should not hold the power to overexpose inappropriate content to young people. Social media shouldn't have the power to show us something we're not ready to see. Another issue is the open and unrestricted drug market. Some people say or wonder if there's even a direct correlation, like what does drug use have anything to do with social media? But 47% of adolescents have tried illegal drugs before the age of 18. Meta platforms and social media in general normalize and glamorize substance abuse. Snoop Dogg has normalized marijuana and alcohol on his page, influencing any viewer. Drake, an extremely popular influencer, has 10% of his posts containing drugs and alcohol. Both of these influencers are adults and have full right to the use of marijuana within their locality. However, young people are the majority of their followers. Studies show that the majority of their followers are ages 13 through 26. Some people disagree with me. They say that social media can't control anything. They argue that young people are in charge of what they see. However, this argument is invalid. Young people need an extra hand, and sometimes parents are simply not enough. Children ages 13 through 18 are the ones being affected by the lack of attention that these issues require. I don't think that God would want us to completely disregard love and communication. I think God uniquely designed us to create relationships. Romans 12:10 says, "Love one another with brotherly affection, outdo one another in showing honor." But what we see, watch, listen to, and allow in our lives is also important to God. Psalms 19:14 says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. We've been reading a book in college and career prep called The Common Rule. And a man named Justin Whitmel Early said, as he was referring to social media, these things define vast portions of our lives. And while we would like to think that we've carefully chosen them, most often we haven't even given them a second thought. We are nudged into these choices by those who want to make money off of the patterns of our daily lives. We must be the controllers and not the controlled. Young people are going to be the future leaders of our community. We will be the future doctors, lawyers, and pastors. Meta must begin the change. If they don't, then there is huge concern for the youth in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamilet. My question is, Meta has openly acknowledged that it's losing its younger viewers in platforms like TikTok and Snapchat. So one of the things that they are working on is trying to launch an Instagram for students who are under the age of 13. Do you feel like that's a step in the right direction? Or do you think there's another way to go about this?
That's a great question. Thank you. I believe that that is a step into the correct direction, but I would personally do it a little bit more. I'd say that an Instagram available to Instagram and Facebook, any Meta-related platform, should have a separate platform for children 16 and under. Why 16? I just think that that's the age that students are already maturing and stuff. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and it allows students and young people to have access to something that isn't so like vulgar and that isn't so exposing at such a young age. So yes, I think it's a good step.
Yamilet, thank you for spending this year researching and thinking about this important topic. I have a question. Is access to social media a right?
Yes, I'd say it is, because I'd say it's a right for a person over the age of 18, because I think that you have the ability to go and see what you want to see, do what you want to do, but I don't think that it should be something available to young people, because it's like I'm saying, it's something too exposing, and I think that just how much we see at such a young age isn't healthy. And I'm not arguing that we shouldn't have social media, and I'm not arguing that older people should be limited. I'm just arguing for the young people in general, and that they should be able to be limited.
So as you think about holding Meta and other companies responsible for the content that's available, we might find some comparisons in how the government has responded to the tobacco industry, for example. Is it going to be more effective to regulate content, as in eliminate things on these platforms that are not true or that are negatively impacting mental health? Or is it going to be more effective to deter the use of these platforms by certain groups of people, such as children?
What does deter mean?
Discourage. So an example of this might be in fast food. Companies have been required to put nutritional information visible on that food, so people are more informed and have the option of making a better decision for their health. So to inform them and even to deter abuse or misuse. So the two options regulate everything. That means lots of filters, lots of screening, lots of taking things down, or simply deterring, giving reasons why people shouldn't use it, lots of warnings?
That's a good question. I think that your second option is the way to go. I think that social media has tried to limit certain content. Whenever you're going to see an inappropriate video, you have to click allow to be able to watch that video. There are certain guidelines, and they have the right to take down something if it's not, true. But I personally think that kind of encouraging young people to try to avoid the social media that is today, because if they create something that's for young people, like an age restricted platform, I think that would be a great way to go. And even providing, like, for the Instagram and Facebook we know today, providing parental controls for parents to be able to control what is on their feed. I think that would be a step in the right direction, but definitely encouraging young people to, avoid what we know today as Instagram and Facebook.
Yamala, excellent job. You're so
Thank you.
poised. You are on your way to York College, and you want to get involved one day in local politics. And I don't say this to everyone, but I will vote for you one day. But this is my question. I know Congress at a federal level can hold these social media platforms accountable. But my question is there anything that can be done at a local level to protect teenagers and change awareness?
I think bringing awareness simply to, like, what I'm arguing today is a really good way. I know that the whole government situation, like them censoring and stuff, is a really, like, iffy topic, and it's something that, like, not a lot of people are clear about. There are certain things that the government isn't able to do, because platforms and Meta in general is like a private owned companies. Like, they're not owned by the government to be able to say, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. But definitely just bringing awareness and bringing the conversation to the table, because I think the conversation isn't brought up enough. We kind of just go through our days using our phone, and we see what we see, and we don't think about what it does to us. So I just think bringing awareness is, the first step to bettering the situation.
Great. And my second question is about the polarizing effect of Meta. If you have an extreme view and you click on a few extreme videos, and all of a sudden your whole feed gets filled with more and more extreme content. And so my question is, like, how does that, we know it's polarizing, but how does that interact with freedom of speech? Like, who gets to pick what views are extreme and which ones aren't?
That's a really good question. I think that Twitter has definitely had that problem, because so many people, retweet and stuff. And in general, all platforms have people on both sides of the extremity or whatever. But could you repeat your question one more time?
Yeah, how does freedom of speech play into that? Like, who gets to pick what views are extreme and which ones aren't?
I think that they have, platforms in general have guidelines that if they don't follow those certain guidelines, they do have the right. When you download any of these platforms, oftentimes we don't read the terms and conditions. And on that, it's basically telling you that if you post something that's against whatever guidelines we have the right to take it down. So a lot of people don't keep that in mind, and they kind of get upset when their post is taken down. But that's basically what is already available.
In your research, did you run across any kind of data that talked about or suggested that parents may feel uncomfortable about using tools to help supervise some of these, inappropriate platforms?
I did not come across that information, but as a personal belief, I think that it's important for parents to know what we're being exposed to.
Two questions for you, Yamilet. One is about individual responsibility. If these companies are being held responsible, regulated perhaps by government, is there still responsibility on the individual user? And if so, what is that responsibility?
Of course, that's a great question. I think that we all hold responsibility to what we choose to search, to what we choose to look at. And I think that just all comes down to moral. And as a Christian myself, I believe that there's things that I just personally don't think we should search and don't think we should abide by. And it does come down to what you choose. But as I was arguing in my thesis, I don't think that we're mature enough to choose.
Thank you. And one question related to the economics of this, the cost. So I mentioned the tobacco industry before. Many people know that if you want to buy tobacco products now, most of them have a very significant tax attached to them. And part of that tax is to deter the use of them. Would you support any type of fee or tax to use social media? And if so, what should the funds generated from that fee or tax be used for?
I'd never thought about that. I think that could be a way, but I think there would be a lot of rebelling against that, even through parents. Maybe, you're not wanting to add more finances, more expenses to parents who are already paying local taxes and all that stuff for young people. A lot of people even argue that they shouldn't be paying public school taxes if their child is in a private school. So that would just kind of go along with that. Like, why should I pay for something that is not necessarily affecting my child directly? But I'd never thought about that.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm just suggesting a tax on the user. I would be the first to protest a tax on everyone to support social media. Where does the money come from, though, to regulate these industries? Is this the government's job, or who's responsible to regulate Meta and other companies, and where does that money come from to do that?
I didn't necessarily come across that in my research, so I wouldn't be able to answer your question. Sorry.
Great job.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for the attention and listening. And we especially want to thank our three seniors. So let's give them a round of applause again, please. So at this time, we can end our formality and we can take the opportunity to congratulate our three seniors. Please go up and give them some encouragement. And students, we will give you instructions momentarily on dismissal. Thank you.